Good afternoon. My name is Greg Easton. I am the Vice President for Institute Advancement and the Acting Executive Director of the Rensselaer Alumni Association. I'd like to welcome you to the first ever virtual Rensselaer Alumni Hall of Fame induction ceremony. Today, I have the privilege and pleasure of introducing the Honorable Shirley Ann Jackson. During her 22-year tenure, Dr. Jackson's leadership has transformed the university, and her leadership has resulted in significant advances for our students, faculty, and campus. President Jackson has positioned the Institute at the forefront of technology and innovation as it approaches its bicentennial in 2024. Please welcome the 18th President of Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, the Honorable Shirley Ann Jackson.
Thank you, Greg. Good afternoon, everyone. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to our virtual Rensselaer Alumni Hall of Fame induction ceremony. I am pleased to be with you virtually as we celebrate the achievements of the 11 inductees into the Rensselaer Alumni Hall of Fame. As you will hear today, these 11 individuals are some of the brightest minds who have ever attended Rensselaer. In 1995, the Rensselaer Alumni Association, with the full endorsement of the Institute Board of Trustees, created the Rensselaer Alumni Hall of Fame to celebrate and to preserve the exceptional heritage of alumni and alumnae accomplishments throughout the years. The first class was inducted in 1998. The stories of these innovators, pioneers, and entrepreneurs provide a powerful source of inspiration for all who follow in their paths and who, like them, will continue to shape our world. Today, we recognize the 8 new members who were selected for induction into the Rensselaer Alumni Hall of Fame in 2020 and 3 members selected in 2017. These extraordinary individuals include an industrialist, a groundbreaking female test pilot, a pioneering African-American architect, an aeronautics scientist, a computer scientist, a metallurgist, the inventor of sheetrock, an immunologist, an expert in bridge engineering, a Panama Canal builder, and a civil rights trailblazer. Their achievements in a broad range of fields and of disciplines have truly changed the world and carry on the tradition of Rensselaer's distinguished legacy. Before we begin our program, I would like to recognize the members of the selection committee and to publicly thank them for their hard work. I am confident that when we introduce the newest Hall of Fame members, you will agree that this committee was successful in selecting the best of the best. I would like to now present the selection committee chair, Charles Rancourt, of the class of 1970. Mr. Rancourt continued to drive and move this program forward despite the challenges of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and the rise of the Delta variant. Thank you, Chuck, for your hard work and diligence. And now Chuck and Matt Siegel, President of the Rensselaer Alumni Association, will lead us into the presentation of the inductees. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. I am Chuck Rancourt, class of 1970, founding steering member and chair of the Rensselaer Alumni Hall of Fame Selection Committee. The program, now 25 years old, is sponsored by the Rensselaer Alumni Association in concert with the Institute and with full support of the Institute's Board of Trustees. We are very happy to have so many relatives of inductees and inductees themselves from the Hall of Fame classes of 2017 and 2020 with us today. We will now have 90 members who truly represent the best of Rensselaer. There are so many people to thank who were involved in making the program a success. First, let me acknowledge over 160 alumni who were members of the balloting committee. You provided such thoughtful and extremely important input to the process. Thank you to each and every one of you. Next, I want to personally thank the members of the selection committee for their dedication and efforts. Provost Dr. Prabhat Hajala, Vice President, Institute Advancement, Mr. Greg Easton, Ms. Tricia DeLaurie, class of 1985, and RAA board member, Archivist Mr. John Doika, Ms. Savannah Crooks, class of 2020 and past red and white president, Mr. Rob McIntosh, class of 1960, founding steering member and chair of the steering committee, RPI Board of Trustee, Dr. Janet Rutledge, class of 1983, and founding steering member, Professor David Haviland, class of 1964, and longtime member, Mr. Glenn Brown, class of 1954, and founding steering member, Mr. John Leahy, class of 2001, Rensselaer at Hartford, Ms. Terry Kozakowski, class of 1985, my classmate, Roger Mike, class of 1970, Mr. Steve Sasson, class of 1972, inventor of the digital camera and member of the Rensselaer Alumni Hall of Fame, researcher and historian, Mr. Mark Marchand. I must also acknowledge in a very special way the contributions of alumni relations, and in particular, Mr. Peter Padone, founding steering member, for all his work with the class of 2017, and Ms. Dawn McCarthy for all her work with the class of 2020. Thank you both so much. Finally, I want to thank the RAA and the Institute Advancement Team for their continued efforts to celebrate the achievements of Rensselaer alumni. Your efforts are truly valuable. With that, I would like to introduce Matt Siegel, President of the RAA, to say a few words before we announce the inductees.
Thank you so much, Chuck. I also want to thank all of the committee members, past and present, who have participated over the years, and all of my predecessors as president of the RAA for their support of the Hall of Fame. Chuck, I want to especially thank you for your many years of dedicated service to RPI and as chairperson of the selection committee. You were one of the catalysts who made this Hall of Fame possible, and we are truly grateful for all the time and effort you have dedicated to making it a reality for all of us. The Rensselaer Alumni Hall of Fame is a continuous reminder that RPI alumni truly do change the world by applying science to the common purposes of life, just as Stephen Van Rensselaer must have envisioned it almost 200 years ago. This is who RPI alumni are, and this is what we do, and we are very proud of that legacy. With that, we want to recognize the accomplishments of today's Hall of Fame inductees and thank their family members for sharing this honor with us today. We are thrilled that you could join us, and we look forward to celebrating in person when their plaques are installed in the Darren Communications Center hallway, joining the other members of the Hall of Fame. The achievements of these 11 alumni and alumnae in the fields of engineering, science, and the arts have truly changed the world. And now we will begin to recognize these individuals, starting with the class of 2017.
We are pleased to begin this ceremony by inducting the members of the class of 2017. Our first inductee is Alfred Pancoast Boller, class of 1861. Alfred P. Boller was one of the giants among civil engineers who were responsible for the great progress in bridge building following the Civil War. Mr. Boller was an expert in steel construction and did much to advance the art of bridge design and construction in America. Also an expert in foundations, he served as structural contractor on railroads and buildings, including New York City's new high-rise towers. Mr. Boller designed and built many of the largest bridges in the country in his time. He pioneered in the development of swing bridges, building them to record lengths. He also designed the longest cantilever bridge and the longest simple span bridge. In all of his works, he paid great attention to the architectural details and urged his colleagues to do the same. He was a leader in civic and professional organizations and past president of the Rensselaer Alumni Association. At the time of his death, he was regarded as one of the world's foremost structural engineers and bridge engineering experts who contributed enormously to his profession. We are pleased to induct Alfred Pancoast Boller into the Rensselaer Alumni Hall of Fame. We now invite Peter Boller, the great-great-grandson of Mr. Boller, to say a few words regarding Mr. Boller's honor.
Hello, everyone. My name is Peter Boller, and I'm the great-great-grandson of Alfred Pancoast Boller. First of all, my two sisters, Sarah and Amanda, and I would like to thank the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute for welcoming our great-great-grandfather into the Rensselaer Alumni Hall of Fame. Believe it or not, neither Sarah, Amanda, nor I ever got to meet our great-great-grandpa Alfred, so we don't have very many family anecdotes or memories to share with you about him. However, this doesn't mean that growing up, we weren't constantly in our great-great-grandpa's presence. A little known fact about Alfred was that he was an avid and, like with bridge building, very talented watercolor painter. Hung all around our childhood home in St. Paul, Minnesota, beautiful natural landscapes and the little people and animals inside of them, painted by our great-great-grandpa, watched over us. I read online recently in his obituary from 1912 that Alfred had urged his fellow bridge builders to pay more attention to the beauty of their bridges. So, in the same way that his watercolors beautified our home and his bridges beautified our nation, I hope that his legacy in the Rensselaer Alumni Hall of Fame will inspire future students to build beauty in the world and in their lives. Thank you very much.
Our next inductee is Commander Harry Harwood Rousseau, class of 1891. Appointed by President Theodore Roosevelt to serve as a member of the Isthmian Canal Commission in 1907, Commander Harry Harwood Rousseau was one of the leaders in the construction and early management of the Panama Canal. Commander Rousseau had distinguished himself in the Navy Department's Bureau of Yards and Docks, such that he was named the youngest chief of the Bureau, a record to this day. His tenure as chief was short, however, as he was appointed to the Canal Commission almost immediately. Initially overseeing a staff of 10,000, he became the invaluable assistant to the chief engineer, George Goethals. In 1911, he was placed in charge of the design and construction of the canal's terminals, including the dry docks, piers, fuel oil plants, breakwaters, and floating cranes. Commander Rousseau remained connected to the canal's operations for the remainder of his life, far longer than anyone else associated with the project. For his service in the building of the Panama Canal, he was elevated from the rank of commander to rear admiral in 1915 by special act of Congress. We are pleased to induct Commander Harry Harwood Rousseau, class of 1891, into the Rensselaer Alumni Hall of Fame. We now invite John Rousseau, grandson of Commander Rousseau, to say a few words regarding his grandfather's honor.
Hello, I am John Rousseau, one of the 13 grandchildren of Rear Admiral H.H. Rousseau. On behalf of all of us and our families, I want to thank the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute and the Alumni Hall of Fame Selection Committee for their special recognition of our grandfather and for giving us a few moments to speak today. We grew up with stories of his high achievements at RPI and of becoming the youngest admiral in the Navy at the age of 36. We knew from our fathers, some of whom were born in Panama during the construction of the Panama Canal, that the Admiral, as he was known to all, was completely dedicated to the canal project, which he knew would be the greatest engineering feat of all time. His work, his designs and constructions continue to function 24 hours a day, more than 100 years later, as a critical part of the most important trade routes in the world. But we also have our own personal thanks to him for giving generations of his family 100 years of wonderful summers in Blue Hill, Maine, at the small farm he bought for his 3 young boys in 1923, so that they too could experience the wonders of a country life that he knew as a child. He was a remarkable man who gave all of his energy and ability to his country and all of his love to his boys, our fathers. Thank you.
Our third inductee for the class of 2017 is Lieutenant Commander Wesley A. Brown, class of 1951. Lieutenant Commander Wesley Brown broke the color barrier at the U.S. Naval Academy, becoming its first African-American graduate in 1949. He was the 6th African-American to attend the Naval Academy, but the first to graduate. While others left the school because they were ostracized and subjected to repeated acts of hazing and racism, Lieutenant Commander Brown endured the harsh treatment with resilience and grace, well before the dawning of the civil rights struggle against racial discrimination. He continued his education at Rensselaer, earning a bachelor's degree in civil engineering. He served 20 years in the Navy's Civil Engineer Corps, overseeing the construction of military homes, roads, and power plants, followed by construction management positions with the state of New York and Howard University. In 2008, the Naval Academy named its new field house in his honor, the first facility at any U.S. Service Academy named for an African American, celebrating Lieutenant Commander Brown as a pioneer of racial justice. Throughout his life, he was a role model and mentor to minorities who followed in his footsteps. We are pleased to induct Lieutenant Commander Wesley A. Brown, class of 1951, into the Rensselaer Alumni Hall of Fame. We now invite Billy West, daughter of Mr. Brown, to say a few words regarding her father's honor.
On behalf of my brothers Gary and Wes Brown Jr., who are present today, it is a privilege and honor to accept this prestigious award for my late father, Lieutenant Commander Wesley A. Brown, Civil Engineer Corps, United States Navy, retired. My mother would have been very proud to see her partner in life inducted here today. Sadly, she passed away in February of this year, and therefore I would like to recognize her role in supporting Dad through their almost 50 years of marriage. Dad liked working at a very detailed level, and despite the struggles and obstacles that he faced, he always had an amazing ability to see the big picture and what that might mean. Building for the future, ensuring it was sustainable, and that it had a positive effect on people's lives was always at the forefront of his mind. In December of 2017, while in attendance at the Rensselaer Alumni event held at the Smithsonian Institute National Museum of African American History and Culture, we were elated as Dr. Jackson honored my father as a pioneer, and she shared the diligent and committed work of the Rensselaer 2024 strategic plan, which included strengthening the ethnic, gender, intellectual, geographic, and socioeconomic diversity of its students. These goals exemplify the significant tenets of equity and multiculturalism that my father truly valued, and the plan's successful impact on Rensselaer and the global community brings added meaning to this distinguished award, which honors his legacy being recognized here today. We are extremely proud of Dad's achievements that are reflected in academic, military, Black, and American history. And we sincerely thank you, Dr. Jackson, members of the Institute Board of Trustees and Alumni Association, for honoring his memory as a civil rights trailblazer.
Congratulations again to the Rensselaer Alumni Hall of Fame class of 2017 and their families. We will now turn our attention to the class of 2020. The first inductee in the class of 2020 is John Joseph Albright, class of 1868. After first working in Washington, D.C. as a coal agent, John Joseph Albright moved to Buffalo in 1883 to perform similar work for the Philadelphia and Reading Railroads. He then turned to asphalt and land speculation. Together with his brother-in-law, Mr. Albright made Buffalo the second city in the nation to have paved streets. Mr. Albright was largely responsible for assembling the land upon which the Lackawanna Steel Company mill was built in 1901. By 1928, the plant had a yearly production of 1.75 million tons and employed over 8,300 individuals. At the same time, Mr. Albright started investing in hydroelectric projects, initially in Montana, then in Mechanicville, New York, and finally at Niagara Falls. By 1913, he and his associates controlled the Niagara, Lockport, and Ontario power companies. Mr. Albright became wealthy over the years, but believed that the rich, quote, held their money in trust, end quote, and that they had an obligation to return it to their communities. He funded and then donated the Albright Knox Art Gallery to the city of Buffalo. Today, that gallery contains one of the nation's leading collections of art. His continual philanthropic efforts stretched from the library in Scranton, Pennsylvania, to Buffalo schools, to buildings on the Rensselaer campus. We are pleased to induct John Joseph Albright, class of 1868, into the Rensselaer Alumni Hall of Fame. Our next inductee is Marta Ruth Bohn-Meyer, class of 1979. After graduation from Rensselaer, Marta Ruth Bohn-Meyer began work at NASA's Dryden Flight Research Center. She conducted research on flight testing, including developing test techniques for laminar flow research on aircraft wings. Among these projects was the Space Shuttle's thermal protection tiles. She flew in the F-104 to conduct those tests. Miss Bohn-Meyer was a flight engineer in the SR-71 high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft at Dryden. She was the first and only female crew member to fly in one of the triple-sonic SR-71s, serving as navigator during studies of aerodynamics and propulsion. Miss Bohn-Meyer was appointed chief engineer at Dryden in October 2001 after serving in a series of increasingly responsible positions. These included Director of Flight Operations, Director of Safety and Mission Assurance, Deputy Director of Aerospace Projects, and Project Manager for the F-16XL program. She was a widely known precision aerobatic pilot. She died while practicing aerobatics in 2005. Miss Bohn-Meyer is portrayed in a painting at NASA's Lewis Research Center, Superstars of Modern Aeronautics, unveiled in 1998, and is included in a NASA timeline of historical milestones, women's contributions to aeronautics and space, listing her as the first female crew member in the SR-71. She accumulated over 750 flying hours in different NASA aircraft. We are pleased to induct Marta Ruth Bohn-Meyer, class of 1979, into the Rensselaer Alumni Hall of Fame. Our next inductee is Charles I. Cassell, class of 1951. A member of one of the nation's leading African American families in architecture, Charles Cassell served in the Army during World War II. He trained as a pilot with the renowned African American squadron, the Tuskegee Airmen. After graduating, Mr. Cassell worked for his father and then launched his own career with the Navy's Bureau of Yards and Docks, helping to design various buildings. He later joined the Veterans Administration, where he designed hospitals. His last federal position was with the General Services Administration in New England. In 1960, Cassell received his architecture registration in Washington, D.C. He was appointed a professor of the Federal City College and was later named assistant to the vice president before the school was disbanded. In the early 1960s, Mr. Cassell became involved with civil rights in D.C. He supported giving D.C. residents the right to vote in federal elections and helped convince the federal government to provide an election board of education in D.C. He also served as vice chairman of the Emergency Committee on Transportation Crises, president of the D.C. Statehood Party, and chairman of the D.C. Statehood Constitutional Convention. From 1888 until his retirement, he served as vice president of administrative services for the new University of District of Columbia. He was elected a Fellow of the American Institute of Architects in 2008. Mr. Cassell also held important positions in historic preservation. We are pleased to induct Charles I. Cassell into the Rensselaer Alumni Hall of Fame. We now invite Linda Cassell, Mr. Cassell's wife, to say a few words regarding her husband's honor.
I want to thank RPI and specifically Chuck Rancourt and the RPI Hall of Fame Committee for bestowing this wonderful honor on my husband. Charles viewed architecture as a noble cause. His father was one of our country's first African-American architects, and he willed that all 4 of his children would become architects and graduate from Cornell just like he did. Charles spent 2 years at Cornell before World War II intervened. And when the war was over and he came out and was ready to resume his education, his father had a different idea. He said to him, "You know what? You should go to RPI. You will get a better engineering education." And I can tell you that Charles often said that guidance served him so well throughout his career. He was humbled to receive this honor, and I'm so glad that he lived long enough to experience what this meant. And although he died last May, and he will not be present for the ceremony, he was so well aware of the honor. I cannot thank you enough. And at 96, to be inducted into the RPI Hall of Fame, well, that's pretty special. Thank you very much.
Our next inductee is Edgar M. Cortright Jr., class of 1947. Edgar Cortright Jr. began his NASA career in 1948 at the Lewis Research Center in Cleveland. He then worked at NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C. from 1958 to 1968. Mr. Cortright compiled an impressive portfolio of research on propulsion aerodynamics, including fundamental scientific contributions to understanding boundary layer flow on supersonic inlet performance, and interaction propulsive jets. This work was important to the design of supersonic aircraft and other vehicles. Mr. Cortright's work at Lewis and NASA headquarters also included developing overall program plans and operating concepts for NASA. In 1960, he was named Director for Lunar and Planetary Programs in the Office of Space Flight Programs. In that role, Mr. Cortright directed work on unmanned lunar and planetary programs, including the Mariner, Ranger, and Surveyor missions to the Moon, Mars, and Venus. Mr. Cortright was named Deputy Director of the Office of Space Sciences in 1961 and Deputy Associate Administrator for Space Science and Applications in 1963. Mr. Cortright joined the Office of Manned Spaceflight as Deputy Associate Administrator in 1967, where he served until his appointment as Langley Research Center Director in 1968. During his 7-year leadership role at Langley, he managed a range of important NASA efforts. In recognition of his expertise, he was asked to lead the official investigation of the 1970 explosion that crippled the Apollo 13 moon mission spacecraft and forced its return to Earth. After retiring in 1975, Mr. Cortright held corporate leadership positions at Owens, Illinois, and Lockheed. We are pleased to induct Edgar M. Cortright Jr., class of 1947, into the Rensselaer Alumni Hall of Fame. Our next inductee is Professor James A. Parsons, class of 1922. Professor James Parsons began his career in 1922 as an analytical chemist at Duriron, a leading Ohio-based metals manufacturer. He worked on aluminum-bronze alloys, achieving significant advances that earned him the Harmon Foundation Gold Medal in Science. The medal was presented to Mr. Parsons by Dayton native Orville Wright. From 1929 to 1949, Professor Parsons received 8 patents, either by himself or with coworkers, involving the development and application of non-corrosive metals. The patents included advancements in iron alloys, silicon iron compounds, silicon alloy castings, corrosion-resistant iron alloys, a cementation process for treating metals, and a nickel-based alloy. In 1941, the historically black college Wilberforce University awarded Professor Parsons an honorary degree, citing his prominent work as an African-American metallurgical scientist. He was later promoted to chief metallurgist and lab manager. He led an all-African-American staff that researched aluminum, bronze, and tested various treatments to make iron and steel more resistant to corrosion. His work and team leadership at Duriron is credited with paving the way for the development of stainless steel. After retirement, Professor Parsons joined the faculty at Tennessee Agricultural and Industrial University, a historically black college, now known as Tennessee State. He rose to Metallurgy Department Chair and also served as acting dean of the College of Engineering. We are pleased to induct Professor James A. Parsons, class of 1922, into the Rensselaer Alumni Hall of Fame. We now invite Ann Shipp and Wanda Harris, Professor Parsons' daughters, to say a few words regarding their father's honor.
I am Ann Parsons Shipp, the 88-year-old daughter of James A. Parsons Jr. My 93-year-old concert pianist sister and I, a nursing teacher by profession, would like to thank Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute for bestowing this wonderful honor on our father, who would be 121 today. He would be so very proud of this recognition. Our father was an extraordinary man who, at the age of 14, as a young black man, had the audacity to think that he could become an engineer, and he did in a magnificent and consequential way. Our father was often slighted at many times throughout his career, but nevertheless remained steadfast in his pursuit of excellence, whether he was pursuing his patents or training young minds in math and science. Our father thought hypocrisy would eventually affect the destiny of this country, but in the end, he held out hope through his incredible spirit built on truth, respect, and caring, that one day this country would prevail and overcome its problems. Again, thank you, RPI, for honoring our father, James A. Parsons Jr. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Good afternoon. I am the 93-year-old elder daughter of James A. Parsons Jr., and it is my privilege to acknowledge on his behalf his induction into Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute's Hall of Fame. Although RPI is recognizing him as an impressive graduate, scientist, and inventor, my memories of him are much more intimate. In fact, it wasn't until I was a teenager that I became aware of his many contributions to the scientific world. He was simply my daddy, a quiet, unassuming, loving husband and father, and a God-fearing man. Family was his primary focus. He created lasting bonds for us through frequent motor trips for visits with his extended family in various communities in Ohio. In addition, my sister and I traveled with my mother to New York City every year in order to communicate with her family, her mother, father, and siblings who had migrated to New York City from Anoka, Minnesota. Because of my father's successful scientific career, he was able to provide us with a stable home and many cultural advantages in a racially hostile and restrictive society. Only now, 120 years after his birth, is that society beginning to acknowledge and appreciate the contributions of the thousands of people of color who have, during the decades following the Civil War, made outstanding contributions to the fabric of this country and of the world. James A. Parsons was a good man, and this honor is well deserved. Thank you for this recognition.
Our next inductee is Augustine Sackett, class of 1862. After serving in the Navy during the Civil War, Augustine Sackett moved to New York City, working as a paper collar manufacturer. He launched several entrepreneurial efforts involving the use of paper as a building material. Mr. Sackett was awarded a patent for a product used as a sheath for walls and ceilings. Over 2 decades, he improved the product as a replacement for the time-consuming use of wet plaster and slat boards for building walls. The final iteration of his invention, called Sackett Plasterboard, consisted of alternating layers of mineral gypsum and paper to create a, quote, drywall. This pre-made rigid product could be easily nailed to studs in walls and could be painted or accept wallpaper. It also had the added benefit of being fireproof. He received a patent for the product in 1894. As use of the product increased, Mr. Sackett sold Sackett Plasterboard Company to the United States Gypsum Company. Use of Sackett drywall continued to grow during the early 20th century and exploded in the post-World War II years. By 1955, half of all new homes and buildings in the country were constructed using drywall. He was elected to the National Inventors Hall of Fame in 2017. The organization noted that 97% of construction projects used drywall. They went on to say that each year, North American drywall companies shipped enough of Sackett's invention to circle our planet in one 4-foot wide strip about 40 times. The average new house in America today contains over 6,000 feet of drywall. We are pleased to induct Augustine Sackett, class of 1862, into the Rensselaer Alumni Hall of Fame. We now invite Mr. Sackett's great-great-great-grandson, Anthony Belanti, to say a few words.
Thank you for recognizing my great-great-great-grandfather with this prestigious honor. I speak for my entire family when I say we are grateful to RPI for acknowledging his work and the work of all the Hall of Fame honorees today. When he patented his Sackett board in 1894, I'm sure he wouldn't have known how impactful his invention would be. As you know, few modern products have transformed construction as much as drywall. As a child, when my mother would tell me stories about Augustine, I was not only proud, but it ignited my love of history, and particularly my family history. Now, his story has inspired my daughter, Augustine's great-great-great-great-granddaughter, who admits she will have some excellent book report topics for years to come. We are so grateful to you for recognizing and honoring these incredible inventors and innovators, encouraging others to dare to dream and create things that will change the world. Thank you.
Our next inductee is Dr. Peter E. Hart, class of 1962. Dr. Peter Hart began his career with the Artificial Intelligence Center at SRI International, a nonprofit scientific research institute founded by Stanford University trustees. He later served as director. While working there, Mr. Hart was a key part of the team that developed Shaky the Robot in 1972. The project was unique because it combined research in robotics, computer vision, and natural language processing to create the world's first general-purpose mobile robot, able to reason about its own actions. The robot's development involved several scientific milestones that have had far-reaching impacts on robotics and artificial intelligence, as well as computer science. Shaky now sits in the Computer History Museum in Mountain View, California. In 1973, Dr. Hart completed a book, Pattern Classification and Scene Analysis, co-authored by R.O. Duda, that had a lasting impact on computer science and artificial intelligence. Later in his career, while at Ricoh Group, he founded Ricoh Innovations Incorporated to create new technology and business opportunities. He served as president of the unit for a decade before becoming a group senior vice president at Ricoh. Dr. Hart was also founding director of the Fairchild Schlumberger Artificial Intelligence Center and a founder of Syntelligence, which specializes in expert systems for financial risk analysis. We are pleased to induct Dr. Peter E. Hart, class of 1962, into the Rensselaer Alumni Hall of Fame. I now invite Dr. Hart to say a few words.
Well, with RPI having almost 200 years of graduates to choose from, I'm greatly honored by this recognition. Thank you. The recognition stems, in part, from a research project I led 50 years ago that created Shaky, the world's first robot with artificial intelligence. Shaky wasn't much to look at, but it could visually perceive its surroundings. It navigated autonomously from place to place. It created and executed its own action plans, and it communicated in simple English. All this on a mainframe computer with a megabyte of memory. Until Shaky, robots existed only in science fiction. They were literally fantasies. Shaky proved that the fantasy could be made real, thereby kicking off a stream of developments that's given us practical robots and now self-driving cars. Back then, all of us on the project team were aware that we were inventing something that had never been seen before. But I don't think any of us could have predicted the stream of benefits that would eventually flow from our research. It's a reminder that we invest in research for the same reason that we plant trees, to benefit future generations. Thank you.
Our final inductee is Dr. Kathryn Egloff Zoon, class of 1970. Dr. Kathryn Zoon began her career studying interferon at the National Institutes of Health, or NIH. In 1980, she and her colleagues were the first to report the purification and partial characterization of human interferon alpha. Interferon is an important protein that can inhibit virus replication. In 1980, Dr. Zoon moved to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. She became the first scientist to report the specific binding of human interferon alpha to a cell surface receptor. From 1992 to 2002, she served as director of FDA's Center for Biologics Evaluation, overseeing the safety and enhancement of the nation's blood supply, vaccines, and biological therapeutics. From 2002 to 2004, Dr. Zoon was Principal Deputy Director of the Center for Cancer Research at the NIH National Cancer Institute. In 2006, she became the first female director of the NIH National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease Division of Intramural Research. Dr. Zoon also served on the World Health Organization Expert Committee on Biological Standardization, the U.S. Department of Defense Malaria Vaccine Program Scientific Advisory Board, the U.S. Agency for International Development Vaccine Development Scientific Consultants Group, and the Division of Earth and Life Sciences Committee of the National Research Council. She served as president for the International Society for Interferon and Cytokine Research from 2000 to 2001. During her career, Dr. Zoon has received numerous awards and recognition, including the 2014 William S. Hancock Award for Achievements in Chemistry, Manufacturing, and Control, and the 2001 Health and Human Services Secretary Award for Distinguished Service. It is our honor to induct Dr. Kathryn Egloff Zoon, class of 1970, into the Rensselaer Alumni Hall of Fame. We now invite Dr. Zoon to say a few words.
Good afternoon. I want to thank the selection committee for considering me for this distinction. I'm humbled to be among the accomplished Rensselaer honorees of the past and those who are being inducted with me today. My RPI education was the foundation of my scientific career. RPI was very challenging at every step of the way, but it taught me always to be prepared and not to shy away from solving hard problems. I owe a debt of gratitude to my RPI professors, especially Dr. Stanley Bunce. His support was special at a time when there were so few women at RPI. I want to thank my fellow co-eds and my Phi Kappa Tau family. They provided me rich friendships that helped me to balance my academic and social survival. My gratitude also extends to my mentor at the Johns Hopkins University, the National Institutes of Health, and the Food and Drug Administration. I especially want to acknowledge the support of my family, my husband Bob, a 1968 RPI graduate, my daughters Chrissy and Jen, and my parents Aug and Violet Egloff, and my uncle Robert Pollock, who inspired me to be a chemist. It's truly a special honor to be a member of such a distinguished group of RPI alumni. Thank you.
Congratulations again to our distinguished inductees and their families. To learn more about all the members of the Rensselaer Alumni Hall of Fame, visit alumni.rpi.edu/hall-of-fame.
Thank you to each of you for joining us today. Congratulations again to the class of 2017 and 2020 honorees. Thank you to all the family members who joined us. We are pleased to welcome such esteemed members to the Hall of Fame. A recording of today's event is available in the passport, so feel free to share it with your family or friends. Stay safe and well, and we hope to see you on campus one day. Thank you again.